Hello. Everything working
Now
out?
I only need to hear you. That's my problem. But I will
Okay.
find a way.
Okay.
Micro.
Can you hear something?
Sí, ahora.
Okay.
That's okay. Buen día.
Spanish or English?
Yo hablo mejor español que inglés, obviamente, pero I imagine that we should speak in English, ¿no? O continental English, right?
Bueno, no sé. A mí me habían solo... Bueno, es que este es el tercer de una serie de webinar que estamos haciendo. El primer y el segundo lo hicimos en inglés, pero entonces yo creo que sí, a lo mejor las personas están esperando que sea en inglés, pero igualmente si, bueno, si alguien...
The presentation is in English. You know, I
Okay.
prepare everything in English, in bad English.
Entonces voy a hacer también la presentación aquí de usted en inglés y bueno, eso no impide de que algo, si alguien al final quiere poner una cuestión, hacer una pregunta en español y eso no hay problema, ¿ok? Perfecto. Bueno, entonces voy a empezar, solo un momento. Bueno, good morning everyone. My name is Mariana. I am an auditor of the Superior Court of Sports Justice for football here in Brazil. So we have separate courts of sports justice. So this one is only for football. And I am here representing our president, Mr. Luis Otávio Verissimo, who sincerely apologizes for having a scheduling conflict at this very moment. And it is a great pleasure to be here with you today and to welcome our dear guest lecturer, Mr. Emilio Garcia Silveiro, who is the chief features specialist and authorities in these incredible themes as the one we have to opportunity to receive today. So thank you all for joining us for this event. And dear Emilio, thank you so much for accepting our invitation. We are very excited to hear your insights on the role of CAS, the role of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and how its proceedings work. You are certainly one of the best experts on the matter, particularly considering your recent experience as a member of the International Council of arbitration for sport, which is the administrative and financial overseer of the CAS, of the Court of Arbitration for Sports. So we deeply appreciate your time today. We apologize for any inconvenience we might have caused here in the Zoom, but I think we have already fixed it, and this is how technology works. Yeah, sometimes it helps us, sometimes it helps us also, but with a little bit of emotion. So the floor is yours for the floor is yours for your lecture, and if time allows, we will take questions from the audience at the end of the event. Thank you very much.
Obrigado, Mariana, and good morning, everyone from Miami. It's 9:30 here in Miami. It means 11:30 Brazilian time. So, you know, again, it's a great pleasure to be with all of you. I see some very good friends also connected. I'm sure that they are not going to learn a lot because they know everything about the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So, but having said that, I would like to thank you very much for the invitation, Rodrigo, as well, for giving me the opportunity to share with you some ideas about the role of the Court of Arbitration for Sport in the world of football, in a certain way in the world of sports. But I am advancing now that football represents almost 80% of the activity of CAS. So for those who love football and sport, and we all love football of sport, obviously, we can say that this is the court of arbitration for football, because again, football represents almost 80% of the total number of CAS proceedings every year. So I don't know which screen are you seeing right now. So you see the screen with the next slide or the big screen? Just
we see a big one with the Court of Arbitration for Sport, your name under it, and then we see a smaller one.
The next one. Okay. Now, if I click the bottom.
Okay. Now we see only the big one.
Okay, technology.
Yeah.
Well, I've prepared a series of slides in which I would like to introduce a little bit the role of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So it's nothing spectacular, particularly for those who are very close to the CAS. So, and there are some friends here connected to the Zoom meeting who are very close to CAS proceedings. So all these slides will not be new for all of them. So again, you are not going to learn a lot for those who are very close to the activity. You are handling cases before the Court of Arbitration for Sport on a regular basis. But for those who are more close to local cases or domestic cases, so CAS might represent something a little bit different, and this is basically the role of the presentation, to give you a brief overview about the role of the Court of Arbitration for Sport in sports, but obviously particularly in football. I will start the presentation by highlighting a little bit how the Court of Arbitration for Sport was founded or created almost 40 years ago. I have here a video. I don't know if the audio. Well, this is a promotional video of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. I would say a little bit old, first because we see the old building of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. By the way, very nice, a chateau at the heart of Lausanne in a very nice area of the city. Now CAS has a more intelligent and new building. So up to the mountain in Lausanne, the video is also old because they refer to 600 cases per year. CAS is now handling almost more than 1,000 cases a year. So this video was produced by the Court of Arbitration for Sport, I think that 6-7 years ago, but it's a short video, no more than 2 minutes, 120 seconds, in which the CAS gives a brief overview about the role of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. But if we look back and we see the way in which the origins of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, we need to say that the CAS has been historically close to the Olympic movement. In other words, the Court of Arbitration for Sport is a baby of the International Olympic Committee. So the sports institution behind the Court of Arbitration for Sport was the International Olympic Committee. So in 1982, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, decided to set up a working group in order to explore the possibility of creating the so-called Court of Arbitration for Sport. At that time, the IOC was confronted with cases at domestic level for the Olympic Games in Los Angeles, for the Games in Moscow, and some other legal proceedings around the Olympic movement. At that time, the IOC was chaired by a Spanish prominent sport administrator, Juan Antonio Samaran, a very well-known Olympic administrator, and he came up with the idea of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. In other words, instead of battling and instead of fighting before ordinary courts all around the world, why not creating the Supreme Court of Sport in which all parties can settle their disputes? This was basically the idea of Juan Antonio Samaran, the president of the IOC, again, in a certain way, forced by some legal actions filed in the United States against the International Olympic Committee in the context of the qualifications for the 1984 Olympic Games. And that's why we ended up with the Court of Arbitration for Sport. After 2 years of discussions, analysis, comments, opinions, and meetings, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, officially ratified the statutes of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, which came into force on 13 June 1984, more than 40 years ago. But in 84, even in 86, CAS was not so powerful and so lucky like nowadays. So it took more than 2 years to refer a case to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So again, the statutes, the rules and regulations came into force on 30 June 84, but only in 86, they handled the first case. And on top of that was a so-called domestic case, a Swiss case, because the Court of Arbitration for Sport, as we will see later on, is based in Switzerland, is a Swiss product, and the reality, again, is it took more than 2 years to deal with the first case, and this case was a pure domestic case between a club, ice hockey club, and the Swiss Ice Hockey Federation. The Court of Arbitration for Sport is an alternative remedy to an appeal to the competent state courts. So in Switzerland, and as we have seen in the video, almost all international federations recognize the jurisdiction of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. The international federations in Switzerland are private associations, conform in line with the Swiss Civil Code, and according to the Swiss Civil Code, any member who has not consented to a resolution can challenge this resolution before the court. This is Article 75 of the Swiss Civil Code. But according to the jurisprudence of the Swiss Federal Tribunal and according to Swiss law, a private institution or a private association can defer these matters to an arbitral tribunal, provided that this arbitral tribunal is independent from the parties. And this is exactly the role of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. It's an alternative remedy to the competent state courts in Switzerland and all around the world. In other words, instead of inviting you to take your case before ordinary courts, FIFA, UEFA, the IOC, FIBA, FINA now is swimming something, or all the international federations, they have a clause in their statutes by means of which all disputes must be settled before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Again, I refer to this, and we have been confronted with several cases in which the Swiss Federal Tribunal analyzed this forced arbitration and the alternative remedy of CAS vis-a-vis the ordinary courts. And the opinion of the Swiss Supreme Court is that this is in line with Swiss law. And there are some CAS panels and also some Supreme Court decisions in Switzerland which emphasizes that this alternative remedy is fully in line with Swiss law, again, provided that the Court of Arbitration for Sport is independent from the parties dealing with the conflict. What's the main role of the Court of Arbitration for Sport? As the video says, well, the main role of the Court of Arbitration for Sport is to settle sports disputes. This is basically the role of the CAS. The question might be, okay, well, you know, it means international disputes, domestic disputes, confederation disputes. Well, CAS accepts all kinds of disputes, national disputes, regional disputes, or international disputes. It's up to the institution to define the authority of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So it means that CBF can introduce, you know, an article in their statutes by means of which, you know, they defer all kinds of disputes to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, provided that this is in line with Brazilian law, obviously. So AFA, the Argentinian Football Federation, your lovely neighbors, can do exactly the same, and they do the same. So, you know, they can include a clause in their statutes by means of which all kinds of disputes, internal disputes of AFA, Asociación Argentina de Fútbol, can be settled in the context of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Either a disciplinary decision of the disciplinary panels, an ethics decision, a decision of the administration, whatever. CONMEBOL can do the same. Indeed, CONMEBOL follows this line. All kinds of decisions, final decisions rendered by CONMEBOL, must be challenged before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So if playing Copa Libertadores, Fluminense or Palmeiras, they get you know, a match behind closed doors, a fine of 2 million or whatever, so all these kind of decisions from CONMEBOL can be challenged before the court, must be challenged in accordance with the CONMEBOL statutes with the, before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. It's exactly the same with FIFA. And FIFA is the main engine of cases before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. We have a specific clause in our statutes by means of which all kinds of disputes must end before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. This is basically the role of CAS. It's the Supreme Court in sports, it's the Supreme Court in football worldwide. And then the institutions decide. FIFA can also decide, well, you know, all our cases will be handled by whatever international arbitral institution. But FIFA decided that CAS is the perfect fit for these disputes. Again, UEFA, CONMEBOL, CONCACAF, they can do the same, but they all recognize CAS. Also, most of the national federations, they recognize CAS as the competent forum to deal with their disputes. I referred to this in the beginning. The CAS is an independent and specialized arbitral institution. And this is a Swiss foundation. Technically speaking, the ICAS, the CAS, the Court of Arbitration for Sport, is a Swiss foundation based in Lausanne, Switzerland. And the CAS provides services for the settlement of sports-related disputes throughout mediation. It is not very common. It's not very successful. So mediation is not an active path before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. But, you know, arbitration is very common. And as I mentioned before, CAS handles more than almost 1,000 cases a year. Domestic cases, regional cases, and international cases. In football, badminton, cycling, or basketball, in employment dispute matters, Corinthians against Real Madrid for the transfer fee of whatever player, cycling, doping athlete, or Olympic Games, Marta, was sanctioned with 2 matches due to a red card against Spain. So she will miss the final of the Olympic Games. You know, the case ended up before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So last summer, we were confronted with a case, 4 cases during the Olympics. One case was Marta against FIFA. So, and this is a typical case in which your heart is divided. You know, Marta is a legend. He's not a football player. He's a legend. It's the last time, the last opportunity to play the last match of her career. And then you are confronted in a case in which you need to defend a serious disciplinary decision against the player before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So it was a nice case from a technical and also personal standpoint. But again, CAS deals with all these kind of cases. The variety of cases is huge here before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. All the Olympic international federations and several non-Olympic federations recognize the jurisdiction of CAS. So it means that CAS is very popular among the international federations. Every kind of dispute at international level with international federations is referred to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. On top of that, and as I mentioned, also domestic cases or regional cases can be settled in the context of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So CAS is not only the forum for the international federations, CAS is also the forum for regional or domestic football or sports institutions. It only depends on the free decision of the sport institution. So the case of AFA is an example. The case of CBF is a different example. The case of the United States Soccer Federation is also a different example. It depends a little bit. At domestic level, in a certain way, they are free to recognize the Court of Arbitration for Sport as the right body to settle disputes, domestic disputes. Why CAS is so relevant and so useful? So we started with this case 40 years ago, ice hockey case in '86. It took more than 2 years to deal with the first case. How can it be possible that after 40 years, CAS is dealing with 1,000 cases per year? Obviously, and we will see this later on, football plays a role, and you will see this in the statistics. So since football recognized the jurisdiction of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, the number of cases before the CAS exploded. But obviously, you know, the CAS is also a useful system due to these particularities. The first one is recognition. CAS is well established under Swiss law, and decisions can be enforced at worldwide level, either throughout the New York Convention or the statutes or disciplinary codes of the respective international sports federations. So you can use the New York Convention to enforce a CAS award in Brazil, but at the same time, Palmeiras can use, or Corinthians or Flamengo can use the FIFA disciplinary code to enforce this CAS award against a Saudi club or a Spanish club. So the system works and is well recognized. Then, you know, even though we are talking about international arbitration, the system is simple. So you don't need to be the best lawyer in the world to deal with a CAS case. Obviously, the more you know the system, the better for you and for your client and for your case. But the case is not super complex. So, and the rules and regulations are simple. So there are books, jurisprudence, you can learn fast. So it's not a very complex case. You know, when you are a lawyer and you have a proper background, I'm sure that, you know, in a few months, you can be familiar with the CAS system, the CAS rules and regulations, and the CAS jurisprudence. The third important factor is the international setting. So while CAS is based in Lausanne, you know, it's a pure international setup. So the CAS operates in English, French, and Spanish mainly, but why not also in Portuguese? So if we have a domestic dispute between two Portuguese clubs, or a Portuguese club, a Brazilian club and a Brazilian player, so parties can decide to deal with this case in Portuguese. So it's not common, I have to admit, but you know, English, French, and Spanish, they play an important role, but it's a pure international setting. So two Brazilian clubs, two Brazilian players can settle a dispute in Portuguese before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. There are a lot of very good CAS arbitrators that they are fluent in Portuguese and they can deal with a Brazilian dispute in Portuguese. Special knowledge. Well, the Court of Arbitration for Sport is the Court of Arbitration for Sport. In this sense, those who are adjudicating the cases, the judges, the arbitrators, those who have to render decisions, they know the field of play. So if we are talking about football, they know the basics of everything, the regulations on the status and transfer of players, statutes, regulations of federations, everything about the sport. So I'm sure that you are familiar in Brazil, in a certain way, it's a very particular case, no? But you know, in certain countries, all cases end up before ordinary courts. I've been the legal director of the Spanish FA for 9 years. Spain is also a very particular system in which all decisions passed by the federation can be challenged before ordinary courts. So I've been traveling all around Spain, defending the Spanish Football Federation in civil, administrative, criminal, employment cases. And you know, you realize the first day that when you end up in a civil court and you start speaking about the transfer of player or a disciplinary action, you know, in a court in which the judge deals with divorce, problems between neighbors, you know, an accident. So, you know, they don't know anything about the sport. So that's why CAS exists, in order to provide the parties with a special knowledge of the different topics. And then, you know, and this is linked with the simplicity of the system and the first point, enforcement with recognition. Again, it's a very equal system. Both parties are treated in the same way, obviously. So this is absolutely normal. And also, due to the recognition and legal basis under Swiss law, the enforcement of cases is simple and very, very effective. These are, in my opinion, the main characteristics which give CAS strength and power nowadays, and obviously over the last 40 years since they dealt with the first case in '86, this ice hockey case, domestic case in Switzerland. The CAS operates throughout these 3-4 divisions. So the ICAS is the board of directors of the CAS. So the ICAS is the internal organ which governs the activity of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. But when I refer the ICAS governs, it means that, you know, we govern the financial activity and the institutional activity of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. But the ICAS members, we don't deal with proceedings and we don't intervene in proceedings. So the board of directors of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, we guarantee that the CAS can continue operating because we have enough funds. We guarantee that, you know, the quality of the service is okay. We guarantee that the rules are in line with the latest decisions, etc., etc., etc. But the members of the ICAS, right now we are 24 members, coming from different parts of the world. There is a Brazilian representative, a judge within the group, and different backgrounds. We are not coming all from sports, coming from different sectors, but they are all lawyers. Again, the ICAS is the board of directors of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, but we don't intervene in proceedings. Then the CAS is divided in these 4 divisions. Well, there is the CAS administration. It means the employees, those who are working in Lausanne and guaranteeing that the system works, send the emails, get the notifications, etc., etc., etc. That's completely normal. And then the different divisions: the ordinary division, the appeal division, the anti-doping division, and the ad hoc divisions. I will come back to this structure later on. For those who are very close to the CAS, you know that the most popular, active, and effective division is the appeal division. So it's the division in charge of cases coming from federations, say the domestic, regional, or international. So the appeal division attracts more than 85% of the cases of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Ordinary division is 2 institutions, 2 clubs, settle the case by means of an agreement, and they go to the CAS. Anti-doping division, they deal with anti-doping cases. And then ad hoc divisions is also something very particular. Every time there is an important sports tournament, like the Olympic Games, the CAS sets up a concrete division in order to deal with these cases. For instance, Olympic Games in Paris, Summer Olympic Games in Paris. So in order to deal with all kinds of disputes arising from the Olympic Games, the CAS set up an ad hoc division for the Olympic Games 2024. So a dedicated group of arbitrators who are going to be in charge of these disputes just for this tournament. This is the ratio of the ad hoc divisions. As I mentioned, I've been working in sports for more than 20 years, first at the Spanish Football Federation as legal director, then moved to UEFA in Lyon, and finally I ended up here in FIFA. Well, during my career, I had the big pleasure to be active before the Court of Arbitration for Sport, representing parties. Then when I moved to UEFA, I've been appointed CAS arbitrator. Then I came back to private practice representing UEFA. So I stepped down as CAS arbitrator because you cannot have 2 hats. So either you are arbitrator or lawyer. So I've been first an active lawyer representing parties, mainly the Spanish FA, before the CAS. Then I became CAS arbitrator, and then I stepped down and became again a very active lawyer before the Court of Arbitration for Sport, representing mainly UEFA during my period there, and then FIFA. And then finally, 3 years ago, I've been appointed ICAS member. So I'm now member of the board of directors of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, again, overseeing the activity of the Court of Arbitration for Sport with other members. So due to these periods, I've seen the different phases of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. I've seen the way in which, as lawyer, you operate before the CAS, also the way in which cases are handling internally, being an arbitrator, and now, obviously, as an ICAS member, you see things from a different perspective. As I mentioned, the International Court of Arbitration for Sport, the ICAS, is a group of lawyers coming from all around the world, different backgrounds. Sometimes they are not close to a sport. They are judges or former judges in different jurisdictions, but they all give valuable opinions on the activity of the regular activity of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. As I mentioned, and I will mention again and again and again, we are not involved in the disputes. So if there is a case with FIFA, and there are hundreds of cases every year in football, and with FIFA, I don't intervene. So I don't know anything about the cases being handled. I don't know the way in which, the arbitrators are appointed. We are not involved in the disputes. I could say that we are involved in more in the political aspects of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So we need to approve the accounts. We need to budget the annual activity. You know, we meet in order to evaluate amendments to the regulations. We set up the ad hoc divisions for the Olympic Games. All this administrative work that someone has to do, and this is basically the role of the CAS, the International Court of Arbitration for Sport. As I mentioned, is the board of directors of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Some figures about the CAS. First case in 1986, ice hockey case in Switzerland. 2003, this is the year 2002, 2003. By the way, first case at CAS was a Brazilian case. First case and first recognition of the Court of Arbitration for Sport by FIFA was in 2002, 2003. At that time, the CAS was handling less than 100 cases. Nowadays, you know, CAS is handling almost 1,000 cases. So it means that football represents a lot within the daily activity of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and thanks to football, figures have increasingly changed over the last 20 years. So since FIFA recognized the CAS jurisdiction, CAS has changed forever. According to the most recent statistics, football represents 82% of the CAS cases. The rest are cycling, athletics, tennis, boxing, basketball, ski, swimming. So I would say it is residual in a certain way. So the engine of CAS is nowadays football. But not only FIFA cases, also, again, regional cases coming from the different confederations, AFC, CONMEBOL, CAF, CONCACAF, UEFA, obviously, but also domestic cases. There are a lot of domestic cases which are being referred by the different football federations all around the world to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. A few general questions about CAS proceedings. I referred to this a few slides ago. The different CAS proceedings by type. Again, the most common proceedings is appeal proceedings. For those who are close, it's very simple to understand. It means that, you know, there is a national football federation or a regional football confederation or FIFA, and they establish in the statutes that all kinds of disputes and challenge against any kind of FIFA or CBF or CONMEBOL decision can be challenged before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. This is the typical appeal proceedings. Again, it means that the relevant sports governing body, they have a concrete clause by means of which, you know, they refer you to the Court of Arbitration for Sport in case you don't like, you disagree with any kind of administrative, disciplinary, or ethics decision passed by their relevant bodies. This is, again, the most common proceeding within the CAS system. Ordinary proceedings. The parties voluntarily agree to arbitrate the dispute. So imagine a football agent and CBF, you know, a Spanish football agent or a match agent. Imagine a Spanish match agent who is working for CBF, organizing friendly matches in Asia, something that nowadays is very common. So the guy is working in Asia, finding teams to play 2 international matches with the most successful national team in the world, Brazil. They sign an agreement, the matches are played, and then after 2 or 3 months, CBF refused to pay the amount agreed to the match agent. So parties can decide to go to ordinary proceedings before the Court of Arbitration for Sport, most likely because they agree on this jurisdiction when they sign the contract. And this is the difference between the appeal proceedings and the ordinary proceedings. Appeal proceedings, in a certain way, is forced arbitration. FIFA forces you to go to CAS in case you disagree with my decision. Ordinary proceedings means that both parties voluntarily agree to arbitrate the dispute before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Then we have the anti-doping proceedings, or the anti-doping division. This is fully dedicated to anti-doping cases. Why? Because particularly at international level, there are a lot of international federations that they don't have the money and the knowledge to deal with anti-doping cases. Well, FIFA is a very well recognized international sports federation. FIBA basketball, swimming, athletics, the IOC. Well, you know, in a certain way, we have money and we can live with these cases. We have 2 or 3 anti-doping experts here. We have a dedicated panel to deal with anti-doping matters. We have employees who know a little bit how the system works. But there are a lot of international federations that they cannot handle an anti-doping case in a proper way. Knowledge, money, expertise, etc. And that's why a few years ago, CAS decided to set up this anti-doping division, by means of which an international federation can delegate all their anti-doping powers and the adjudicatory phase in the hands of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So CAS, the anti-doping division of CAS, will deal with the case and will adjudicate the decision. It's something like you are externalizing your doping problems. You put your doping responsibilities, doping problems, doping cases in a third-party institution. I'm not going to deal with doping cases, I'm sorry. It's too dangerous for me, it's too complicated, I don't have the resources. So if, you know, in badminton, or if bowling, or if, I don't know, in which sport, you know, I don't want to deal with my doping cases, you know, I refer this to the anti-doping division of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and they deal with this case. And then finally, I referred to this a few minutes ago, the so-called ad hoc divisions, the ad hoc panels, mainly for the Olympic Games. These are the most popular ad hoc divisions for the Summer Olympic and Winter Olympic, with dedicated arbitrators. So every time that we have a Summer Olympic Games, we have an ad hoc division. And the division is different every time there is an Olympic summer tournament. So then the judges, the arbitrators are different, were different in 2024, and they will be different in 2021, and they will be different in Los Angeles in 2028. But they are all coming from the list, obviously. These ad hoc divisions, not only for the Olympics, also for the World Cups and other major events, they deal with cases and adjudicate cases in a very fast track proceedings. So, you know, in the middle of the Olympic Games, you need a decision tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. So, you know, it's always very fast and very quick. In the last Olympic Games in Paris 2024, we have been confronted with 4 different cases. It's something unusual for football during the Olympic tournament, but we have been confronted with 4 fast-track proceedings. Maybe, well, you remember the case of Marta for sure, but maybe you remember the case of the drones with the women's Canada soccer, using drones in order to spy others. Was very popular during this time in the Olympics. And, you know, you need to deal with a case in 48 hours. So forget it about all your procedural rights and right to be heard. Blah, blah. Of course, the right to be heard is guaranteed, but it is always very limited. So in the sense that the open proceedings today You have to work for 24 hours in your case, then the hearing is the day after, and then the decision the day after the hearing. So all these kind of cases before the ad hoc divisions, particularly during the Olympics, are fast-track proceedings. But it's fun and it's challenging, obviously, because it's always super fast and always very interesting cases. Is the CAS an independent arbitral tribunal? This is a good question, and according to the Swiss Federal Tribunal vision, yes, it is. Since the beginning, this factor has been challenged before the Swiss Federal Tribunal with the Gundel case in 1993, La Sutina case, and then Mutu and Petstein in 2018. 3 times the Swiss Federal Tribunal declared that the CAS is independent from the IOC and independent from the international federations. Obviously, the most recognized case when it comes to the CAS independence is this Gundel case, in which the Swiss Federal Tribunal told the CAS, well, let's say that you are independent, provided that in the next few months you change this, and this. So in 1993, the Swiss Federal Tribunal was very close to declare the CAS as non-independent arbitral tribunal within the sports system, but the Swiss Federal Tribunal gave CAS a second chance, and since then everything changed in the life of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. Official languages, cost. I mentioned these, the most popular languages before the CAS are English, Spanish, and French. But it doesn't mean that you cannot operate in German, Italian, or Portuguese. So it depends on the dispute, it depends on the arbitrators. But CAS is ready to deal with Portuguese cases or cases in Portuguese, Brazilian cases in Portuguese, or Arabic cases between Morocco and Saudi. So it depends on the parties and it depends on the viability of the arbitrators. But there are more than 400 arbitrators on the list, and they all speak different languages. Costs. Is CAS expensive or cheap institution? Well, this is a good question, and the answer is not easy. I could say that it is cheaper than ordinary courts, faster than ordinary courts, and in a certain way more effective than ordinary courts. But on a regular basis, it's not cheap. So for all kinds of international decisions passed by FIFA, for instance, you only need to pay the appeal fee. It's 1,000 Swiss francs. So it means that if FIFA imposes $300,000 fine on Flamengo during the Club World Cup here in the States in June, July, Flamengo only needs to pay 1,000 Swiss francs in order to appeal this decision. But for the rest, regional cases, domestic cases, international cases, without this disciplinary or ethics component, CAS is in a certain way expensive. So a regular CAS case costs between 30, 40, 50, between $50,000 and $100,000. This is basically the cost of a regular CAS case. So it means that for small disputes, it doesn't make sense, obviously. For big disputes, it makes totally sense. So, it's less expensive and it is more attractive than going to ordinary courts. Some figures about CAS and football. Don't want to enter into details. I already flagged some of these figures. FIFA recognized the jurisdiction of the Court of Arbitration for Sport in 2002 and was incorporated in the statutes in 2004. As we have seen since then, the number of cases explode. First case, CAS for football FIFA was Galatasaray versus FIFA, Felipe Loureiro and Club Regatas de Flamengo. So it's a Turkish-Brazilian case. It was this 2003 0453 case. It was a contractual dispute between the Brazilian player and Galatasaray. Panel of 3 arbitrators and award notified in 2003. Again, since then, we have seen, a very fast recognition of the Court of Arbitration for Sport in the world of football, and figures have exploded since then. In 2023, FIFA dealt with 431 cases before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So 431 cases were challenged. FIFA decisions were challenged before the Court of Arbitration for Sport, mainly coming from the FIFA Football Tribunal, DRC and PSC, but also disciplinary decisions, ethics decisions, decisions passed by the FIFA administration. This is the breakdown of these decisions. But obviously, on top of these 430 cases, we have football cases coming from the confederations and coming from the member associations. So in total, more than 800 cases, football cases, have been dealt by the Court of Arbitration for Sport in 2023. It represents, again, 82% of the CAS activity. Mainly in football, CAS deals with contractual disputes and transfer of players and solidarity and training compensation, that in the end is the area of transfers. So it represents 85%, 90% of our cases. All kind of football contractual disputes, transfer of players, solidarity or training compensation. Again, it represents almost 90% of our cases before, and domestic cases and regional cases before the Court of Arbitration for Sport. This is our clause in the statutes. Article 49, FIFA recognized the independent Court of Arbitration for Sport to resolve disputes between FIFA, member associations, confederations, league players, etc., etc., etc. And in this article, we inform the parties about the deadline to challenge FIFA decisions, the limitations, right to be heard, etc., etc., etc. These are the two articles, main articles, which govern the jurisdiction of the Court of Arbitration for Sport vis-a-vis FIFA, Article 49 and Article 50 of the FIFA statutes. Other topics, the Swiss Federal Tribunal. CAS decisions are final, but can be challenged before the Swiss Federal Tribunal. But can be challenged before the Swiss Federal Tribunal with important limitations. So, putting differently, the appeal before the Swiss Federal Tribunal against a CAS award is not an ordinary appeal. It's an extraordinary appeal. So, this is an arbitral tribunal and an arbitral decision that can be only challenged based on 4 procedural mistakes. So, according to Swiss law. So, the lack of jurisdiction of the Court of Arbitration for Sport, the violation of the right to be heard, the violation of public order. So, there are only 4 grounds in which you can base your appeal before the Swiss Federal Tribunal. It means that the chances that your CAS award will be overturned by the Swiss Federal Tribunal are extremely limited. So, according to the statistics, you have less than 4% chances to win a case before the Swiss Federal Tribunal. And more, we see parties challenging cases before the Swiss Federal Tribunal, but the figures and the percentages are almost always the same. So less than 5% of the cases are admitted by the Swiss Federal Tribunal. And why? just because, again, the grounds are limited to A, B, C, and D. It doesn't mean that you are right or wrong. It means that you can only challenge a CAS award based on the irregular constitution of the panel, your right to be heard has been violated, or the lack of jurisdiction of the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So, in other words, the scope is extraordinarily limited by means of Swiss law. So, and that's why we end up with these figures that less than 5% of chances to win a case before the Swiss Federal Tribunal. How can I get more relevant info about the Court of Arbitration for Sport? Well, the CAS publish every year on the website tascas.org the annual report and financial statements, and there are a lot of documents, and there is a lot of information about the CAS on the official webpage. At the same time, we are also very vocal when it comes to TAS, and there are a lot of documents on the FIFA website, legal.fifa.com. We also publish an annual report about the activity on CAS and football in our webpage. And these are the two ways to get or to be more familiar with the activity of the Court of Arbitration for Sport: visiting the web pages, the tascas.org with a lot of documents, or again legal.fifa.com with the annual reports and the jurisprudence that we publish every 4 months. That's all from my side. If you have any questions, comments, ideas to improve the CAS system, I'm here. I'm fully available. I hope it was not too boring for all of you, particularly for those who are familiar with the CAS system. And once again, thank you very much for the invitation, Mariana, and the group. Again, if you have any questions, comments, this is the time. Thank you very much, and the floor is back to you, Mariana.
Thank you very much, Mr. Emilio. I was very excited to hearing you today. I have learned a lot, and I am not here, I'm not telling this just because we are here face to face, but this is the truth. I work with this theme, and I was not aware of these details about the CAS, about the ICAS. So this was very, how can I say, a very good time. You know, we've learned a lot. I could profit a lot from your words. I was just curious about one thing. You said that the mediation is not very successful. We talk much more about arbitration when it comes to CAS.
Right.
But if one case is presented asking for a mediation procedure, if it's not successful, can it, how can I say, not be turned into arbitration, but we can have a second moment to try to solve it, or the things are completely different one from another?
No, well, mediation is always available and open to the parties. So, you know, if you are not successful mediating your disputes, so the mediator will close the case, end of the story. So it doesn't mean that
the mediator is from the CAS, or he
so there is a list of mediators appointed by the Court of Arbitration for Sport. So if you want to mediate a case before the Court of Arbitration for Sport, you need to file your document and ask CAS to nominate a mediator. CAS will nominate a mediator, and the mediator will start working on the case. But if in a certain moment the mediator thinks that, you know, there is no case here, we'll close the mediation, end of the story, and then you can come back after a few months and try again, or refer the case to dispute.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I would like to ask my colleagues if they have some question. I think we have one here from João Marcos Siqueira. Go ahead, João.
Obrigado, Mariana. So, Emilio, it's nice to see you again. I've watched your presentation in CAS on 22 and also on 24. Great content, the same one that you were being presenting here. So I want to address with you one issue that we spoke about this theme in CAS during the last conference that we had. We were 1 week before the final decision involving the Jaha case, the outcome of Jaha case. So right after this outcome, we had also I don't know if I can call an incident, which was related to the general advocate opinion, and we addressed this issue in the last class that we had. And further, we had from FIFA these explanatory notes, and one of the issues that were presented by FIFA was the fact that this consultation was still taking place. It was not over, as far as I understood, by the explanatory notes. So what is my point? And this is connected straight to CAS. And what is your view about this first issue of the edition in this explanatory notes? What was your impression about what happened, and what were the information that you received from FIFA by the stakeholders? And looking ahead, what's your point of view about the future and about this battle of striking forces between European Union and CAS, and what is FIFA and how is FIFA is handling this problem? This is my point.
Obrigado, João. Well, we need 2 days to tackle all these matters, definitely. And I would love to participate in such a forum. Long story short, well, the ARA is a relevant case for us, a decision passed by the European Court of Justice, and a decision that will have an impact mainly on Article 17 of the RSTP. Is the end of the system? Obviously, it's not the end of the system. It's just an opinion of the European Court of Justice. And now we are in the process of aligning the new Article 17 with the requirements of the European Court of Justice. As you mentioned, we issue the interim regulations following the ECJ and following on from the consultation process with the parties. I've been in Brussels 10 days ago, meeting the European Commission and the stakeholders, also clubs, leagues, Common Ball was there. So we are in the process of working on the new Article 17, and we expect to reach an agreement before the next big transfer window, June, July, and August. From a more political perspective, yeah, it's now a trend that everything is decided by the Europeans at the European level with the European Court of Justice. It is what it is. It's not only the ARA. Now we have a Advocate General opinion on the case of Seraim and the enforcement of CAS decisions. Well, we are aware of all these matters, and we are trying to do our best. Sometimes for FIFA, it's a little bit difficult in the sense that we are a global organization, but we are subject to 211 jurisdictions, no? And sometimes we are forced to take decisions due to international or even local jurisdictions while we operate at worldwide level, no? And this case of the ARA or the case of Seraim is a good example. And I'm not saying this because we are now in this area of the world, and particularly in South America. I'm saying this because it is true. Imagine that tomorrow Mercosur, for whatever reasons, says, you know what, your Article 17 is also not in line with whatever agreements in the Mercosur area. So how can FIFA operate? So if we need to be aligned with the EU requirements, EU law requirements, then Mercosur requirements, then Asian whatever organization requirements. For us, is almost impossible, no? But well, it is a reality. I think that there are good arguments and opinions in the DRA decision that will help us to improve the system, and this is what we are trying to do. But obviously, it's always very challenging, and I have to admit that from time to time, too political. But we live in this world, and we try to do our best to be aligned with everyone everywhere.
Muito obrigado, Emilio.
Mr. Emilio, we have one question that was posted here on the chat. So Caio Ferreira said, thank you very much for the lecture. Are the sessions public? Is it possible to attend in person? How do we find out about scheduled processes?
Okay, this is a good question. Well, just preliminary remark, Mr. Emilio was my father. I'm only Emilio.
Okay.
So, the title is for senior lawyers, not for a still young lawyer. So, jokes aside, yeah, it is not very common, but CAS hearings can be public, but it must be requested by both parties and accepted by the arbitrators. And this is not very common, I tell you the truth. So I think that in the history of CAS, only 1 or 2 cases were public, but most of them are always behind closed doors.
Most of the times they're online. No, I think they are.
It's online. If they are public, you know, these 2 cases were online. But again, it is the exception. Both parties must accept this, and also the arbitrators, the tribunal should accept the request. Then when it comes to the next cases, you can go to the webpage, CAS webpage, and they have a link with the next hearings taking place in Lausanne or all around the world. But unfortunately, 99% of the cases are behind closed doors because the parties don't request a public hearing.
Okay, so I think we have another hand raised here, Ralph Antonioli.
Hi, how are you? Hi, Emilio. How you doing?
Hello, Ralph.
I'm a immigration lawyer in the United States and trying to get into the sports world. I do have a question though, especially from the U.S. perspective. How does enforcement of a CAS award work? Because I know I worked in international arbitration before, and enforcing the award was a big issue. So how does that work from the CAS perspective?
Thanks, Ralph. And it's a really good question. I referred to this in the beginning. CAS awards can be enforced through two ways. The first one is the New York Convention. The second one in soccer, in football, is the FIFA Disciplinary Code. 99.9% of CAS cases are enforced throughout the FIFA regulations. Why? Because, as you know better than me, because you're an expert, you know, the New York Convention is there, but it takes a lot of time to start with the exequatur and, you know, lawyers involved, so blah, 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 blah. So technically speaking, the CAS award is recognized as an international arbitration decision that can be enforced throughout the New York Convention. But soccer, football, FIFA has a better system to enforce these decisions. That is Article 21 of the FIFA Disciplinary Code. In other words, imagine that we have a dispute between Flamengo, because, you know, I see now my office here and I have a nice shirt of Flamengo signed by Ronaldinho. He was here 3 or 4 months ago doing something in marketing, and my son was there and got a shirt with the signature of Ronaldinho and also a PlayStation remote control. And I see now the shirt of Flamengo. Imagine that Flamengo has a dispute for a player with Real Madrid. So they transfer a football player from Flamengo to Real Madrid for $100 million. Madrid has the obligation to pay this $100 million in 2 installments, one immediately and the additional $50 million after 1 year. After 1 year, Real Madrid decides not to pay to Flamengo the additional amount. So Flamengo knocks the door, well, show me the money, I'm still waiting and I need the money. So they go to FIFA. So the FIFA Football Tribunal renders a decision in favor of Flamengo. So Madrid has to pay $50 million plus interest to Flamengo, blah, 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 blah. And Madrid is dissatisfied and they go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. And then we have a final decision of the Court of Arbitration for Sport by means of which Real Madrid is obliged to pay Flamengo $50 million plus interest. And then the lawyer of Flamengo asks us, well, how can I enforce this decision? Again, first route is New York Convention. Second possibility is you go to the FIFA Disciplinary Code, and the FIFA Disciplinary Committee, and according to our regulations, our members must always comply with the CAS awards. So according to the FIFA system, it's a disciplinary offense not to comply with the CAS award. So if Flamengo knocks the doors, send a letter to the disciplinary committee, FIFA disciplinary committee, informing us that after 2 months, Madrid is still refusing to comply with the CAS award, we will open disciplinary case against Real Madrid. Hey, Real Madrid, we are FIFA, so you are in breach of the disciplinary code. Unless you fulfill this CAS award in the next 30 days, we will execute a transfer ban. Transfer ban means that Madrid cannot hire or cannot attract players. It means that the CAS award will be fulfilled in the next 24 hours. So that's why the self-enforcement system is 100 times more effective than the New York Convention, because, you know, by means of our regulations, we force players, clubs, federations, and confederations to comply with the CAS awards.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, that's very helpful.
Emilio, we have maybe one last question here because we are it's already 12:37. So hi, Emilio, is it possible for a national football federation to choose another court other than to judge? It's a bit okay. Mateus, are you? No, you are in line.
No,
yeah,
I think it's a different question.
Yeah, you're waiting in line. Yeah. So or is it absolutely mandatory for a football national federation to recognize CAS as an appeal court?
Yeah, according to the FIFA statutes, the national federations can decide either to recognize the CAS or alternative arbitration system in place. So CAS is not mandatory for CBF. CAS is not mandatory for the Spanish Football Federation or the United States Soccer Federation. But what is mandatory is that you put in place an arbitral tribunal or an arbitration system in order to help your clubs to settle their disputes.
And Mateus?
Emilio, I would like to ask a question similar to what Half said. It's about the possibility of enforcing a CAS award, but when it is related to an ordinary procedure, especially when it comes from a commercial agreement. For example, we had a sponsorship contract with a betting sponsor and a football club.
No.
It's not possible.
Don't think so. No, don't think so. We changed the disciplinary code in 2019 in order to open the scope of the enforcements. If you remember, if I not, I tell you, from 2011 until 2019, only appeal proceedings before the CAS were enforceable throughout the disciplinary code. In 2019, you know, we decided to open this to ordinary proceedings, right? So, you know, you have an ordinary case before the CAS. We also force you to comply with the CAS awards. provided that both parties are football members. But if Flamengo, Fluminense, or Botafogo, they reach a commercial agreement with a betting operator, and they recognize in the contract CAS as the competent body to deal with the disputes, we are not going to force Flamengo to comply these CAS awards. So it must be that both parties are either football clubs or players or a confederation or league or a federation or whatever. But we are not going to enforce throughout the FIFA system commercial disputes from non-affiliated parties.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, I think we are already advanced in time, so I would like to thank you very much, Emilio Garcia, one more time for being here with us today. It was a very productive morning for all of us, and I want to thank you in the name of our president, and I want to thank the presence of everyone here. We have a lot of messages here at the chat thanking Emilio for the lecture. So I hope we can hear from you in other occasions. And thank you very much.
Obrigado, Mariana, Rodrigo, and the team. So again, I see very well-known faces, Felipe and some other colleagues around, Gustavo. So, you know, all the best, and we keep in touch. Thank you very much for the invitation. Enjoy the rest of the day. Fernanda as well. Ciao.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Ciao. Bye-bye.